evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending wherever in the globe you are. I hope you and your families are in good health and are staying safe. Firstly, thank you for joining yet another webinar of Machine Visionaries hosted by Qualitas Technologies. And I see a lot of audience from different industries and roles joining in today. I must say that today's webinar is especially interesting as we will be discussing about global trends in automation. And as you guys all must be aware that we've come a long way when it comes to automation, and automation has sort of changed many aspects of our life, like improving the quality of our well-being, providing better services for us, lowered product prices, for example, right? And of course, has unlocked many more such advantages, right? And for that very reason, we planned a Q&A session for our audience to make things more interesting with a leader in the automation space. Hopefully you guys take something of value from today's webinar, and yeah, thanks for participating. All right, so I'd like to kick off the webinar by introducing our panelist and a leader in automation, Mr. Jeff, who's been in the automation, robotics, and the machine vision industry for more than 35 years. So he's surely a veteran, and he's probably seen the evolution of technology, which was, conventionally very limited to what it is very massive right now, right? So I'll let Mr. Raghava do a more detailed introduction of him. On the other hand, we have our very own Mr. Raghava, CEO and founder of Qualitas. So he started off his journey back in the US when he was working with Microsoft. But that's when, he too realized the potential of industrial automation and machine vision. And quite a long time back, started off his own company, Qualitas Technologies, 13 years back to be more precise, right? And now we are a full-fledged industrial automation company, who leverage on AI technology to offer solutions to our clients. So on that note, I'll hand it off to you, Mr. Raghava. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Adi, and thank you everyone for joining in this evening. There are a few of you from Southeast Asia, so it's probably very late for you as well. So thanks for joining us and staying up. I promise you it'll be well worth your time. So this is also being live streamed on YouTube. So there's a number of people who are also joining us live on YouTube. We have quite a few people also on Zoom who are part of the registrants, and more joining in. Well, firstly, let me thank our panelist, Mr. Jeff Burnstein. And, Mr. Jeff, as Adi says, has decades of experience in industrial automation. It's very rare to have someone with such a deep background, and someone who is also very vocal and articulate about the industrial automation industry as it stands from a global perspective today. So, being a leading voice on robotics and automation, now Jeff Burnstein has been with the North America's largest automation association for nearly 4 decades, so 40 years with one of the leading organizations. And he advocates for the industry to policymakers, industry groups, news media, and then also in general to the general public. So as of now, he serves on the executive board of the International Federation of Robotics, and he is also the president of the Association for Advancing Automation, A3. And A3 represents more than 1,000 organizations involved in robotics, artificial intelligence, machine vision, motion controls, and related technologies. So he also helped launch A3's new AI board, which is made up of key players in AI, many of whom work closely in machine vision as well. So, many of our audience has an interest in AI and machine vision. And so, there's no better of an audience, none better than Jeff, who can educate us on the global trends. So he's also a global traveler. He's traveled all over the world promoting automation, including taking a delegation of machine vision industry leaders to Mumbai back in India several years ago. So, I think that summarizes this. He's an authority on machine vision and robotics, and we'd love to hear this exciting conversation and see how some of his experience can educate us and be of value. So with that, Jeff, I'd like to thank you once again, and then kick it off without much further ado to ask you for a little background about how you got started with industrial automation, machine vision, and what got you to where you are today.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me. And for those of you who are listening around the world, thanks for taking the time. Well, I got started sort of by accident in this space. I wanted to be a sports writer when I was in college. I loved college football and basketball. And when I graduated college, I didn't know what I was going to do. Somebody I knew was working for a trade association that was promoting downtown Detroit. So I went to work for them right out of college, and I learned about public relations and marketing and worked with the business community in Detroit. And I enjoyed that very much. When there was an opportunity to join the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, what appealed to me was that the robotics industry was supposed to be the next industrial revolution. We're talking about the 1980, 1981 period. There was so much enthusiasm about robotics, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I joined the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, learned about robotics a little bit, and machine vision. That group broke off and formed what became the Robotic Industries Association in 1983. So I left a group of 300 people with the Society of Manufacturing Engineers and moved to the Robotic Industries Association, which was a group of 5 when I got there. And over time, as you said, we've added machine vision groups, motion control, artificial intelligence, and a whole range of technologies to serve the automation industry. So I've had the great fortune of leading the association for the past 14 years, but I've been with the association for 38 years now.
Yeah, no doubt. So the RIA, the Robotics Industries Association, well-known body, authority on robotics, has the who's who of the OEMs, and I think they're worldwide, also very active in India. So yes, that's an interesting history. And so looks like there's been multiple evolutions of associations that have started with in small way, but now have been evolved to a global giants to what it is today. So I'd like to hear more about that evolution from you as we go along in the conversation. So
sure.
You now as A3. Can you tell us a little bit about what the association does and your role in the association, and what are some of the key focus areas for you right now?
Sure. So the association's primary role, if I was going to simplify it to one sentence, is to help companies learn how to successfully apply automation. So no matter what industry a company is in, they need information about how to automate. We're seeing the world become increasingly automated. Companies need automation in order to be stronger competitors. We believe that we're the trusted resource for information on how to get started, what to do once you have started, who to work with, what companies are out there, what new technologies are emerging. So that's our role, and we play that role globally, as you indicated, as we have members all over the world. And personally, my job is to advocate, as you indicated in your opening remarks, for the technology, to explain key issues and key trends, to talk about things like the impact that automation has on jobs, which is a positive one, by the way, and also to talk to policymakers to make sure they don't implement policies that would slow down the advance of automation. It's very important in this world that we understand that these technologies are here to help us, not to hurt us. And in some parts of the world, that message is better understood, in other parts, not so much. There's more concern, more fear. But the reality is the world is becoming more automated, and we need to prepare people for that future by getting them the education they need and the training they need to be successful in an increasingly automated world.
Very true, very true. That's a very important role the association is playing. And when you talk about key trends, the impact automation has, and especially to policymakers. Now, one of the things that we keep hearing, at least back in India, is about how the North America is changing in terms of automation and manufacturing in general. We talk about things being reshored back into the country, supply chains being de-risked, and and also a global shortage of skilled manpower in manufacturing. So now you have a lot of demand, but then you don't have the manpower to cater to it. So in theory, all that is leading to a perfect storm for automation, right? So is that really translating into ground realities? And if so, what are the key challenges that automation players or manufacturing companies need to address in order to meet those challenges?
Well, those are the trends right now, the labor shortage being number one. It doesn't matter what industry I'm talking to, they'll tell me the same thing. They can't find people. It could be to operate a machine shop. It could be to work in warehouses and distribution centers. It can be manufacturing. It doesn't matter. They can't find people. And as a result, they're turning to automation. The supply chain issues are having an impact, not on demand, but on the ability to service that demand. So hopefully those issues will ease here shortly. As far as reshoring, I think we're probably at record numbers, but it's still pretty small. And it's very small relative to the number of manufacturing jobs that were sent overseas. And it's complicated because global players now have global markets as well. And so they need to be able to supply those global markets from someplace close. So it's not easy to just rip up your supply chain in China or Vietnam or anywhere and say, we're going to move it all to the United States. That's a very complicated process. Will there be more coming this way? We think so. May come to the United States, may come to Mexico, but we think it might get closer as a result of these problems that have been brought to the surface through this recent supply chain crisis. So we'll see how big a surge that is. But, the reality is for global players, that's not going to happen overnight.
Got it. And so when it comes to, reshoring, obviously you can't copy and paste a supply chain or a supplier back to a different location. But what is the adoption of automation? So clearly, because of skilled manpower shortages, the demand is increasing. That's for sure. We're seeing that quite a bit. And apart from raw material shortages, there's just the ability to meet the demand of production. And so that's the only way to handle that is through automation. And so what are some of the things that the challenges that one is seeing in adopting automation, and how does automation suppliers or system integrators or consultants, whoever would be the providers for automation, adapt themselves or to cater to that demand?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So while the user community is struggling to get people, so is the supplier community and the system integrator community. And so that is a challenge because with demand so high and not having enough skilled people to go implement the systems or even necessarily manufacture the products that are needed to be installed, it is slowing down the advance of automation a little bit. But with demand so high, maybe it's a little bit slower, but we're in the midst of a long-term trend where we're going to see more and more automation. These supply issues will ease. The automation issue, the labor shortage issue may not ease immediately. So getting the automation into the hands of users is going to be critical. We may see the suppliers figuring out ways to automate their own activities as well. So I think automation will play a role there as well. But this supply chain, the labor shortage is exacerbated in the United States by the fact that in manufacturing, the so-called baby boomer generation is getting to retirement age and beyond right now. So new people in the market aren't always attracted to the jobs that existed 40 years ago in manufacturing. So it's a real challenge because there's a mismatch between the open jobs, which are oftentimes jobs that require hands-on skills that can be acquired at community colleges and technical schools, versus the four-year degree jobs, right? And so everybody in the United States has been taught for decades that the best path forward is to get a four-year degree. And so to get a technical school certificate that would make you employable today in a good job may not be attractive to you, but the job is there. So we need to do something on the educational end in the United States, maybe other places in the world, to communicate these really good jobs exist. Manufacturing is a good career. There's all these openings, but we need to get the skills right. We need to educate society that this is a good path forward. We need to make sure that there are programs in place. We need more apprenticeship programs to give students who are even in high school opportunities to work in industry, gain credit in school, and then maybe choose to go right from high school into a job, not to a four-year school, or to go to a vocational school. So we aren't doing these things at scale in the United States, and probably in a lot of other countries, of trying to fill this labor shortage for the long term. We need to do more.
That's a really good point that you raised. And so it's not just the skilled labor shortage to do these traditional jobs that existed in the baby boomer generation, but the demand for skills today in manufacturing has evolved to what is industry standards today. So for instance, production line workers need to now operate sophisticated machines. They need to probably know how to tune robots. They need to know how to configure a PLC or a sophisticated SCADA systems connected to cloud-based centralized controllers, right? Things like that. And so and that's, even though technology exists and that's been advancing, technology such as machine vision and artificial intelligence, and at the core of it, it's the skills shortage that exists to adopt these technologies for your problems, right? And if I understand, that's kind of where the skill gap exists, to really bridge the gap between supply that exists. There's also a demand, but then how do we really cater to the demand by adopting these technologies?
Yeah, and there's technologies that might help with that, like augmented reality or virtual reality, to train people quickly on how to learn these new skills. And not every job requires that advanced knowledge either. So for instance, if you were starting out years ago, your job might be to walk 6 miles a day in a warehouse, let's say, and lift boxes and move them around. Today, there are mobile robots doing that, fleets of mobile robots doing that. Who oversees those fleets? Well, to be an operator of that fleet might not require that much training to make sure that everything is moving smoothly as it should, and identifying bottlenecks if they occur. The same thing could be true, and I saw a great example of this at a startup company in Michigan. There is a shortage of technicians to work in stores that change your tires on your car. So Discount Tire is one of the leaders in the United States. They're working with a startup company to develop a robotic system to change each of those tires. Now think about what that job used to be. You would have to have some big, strong person, not me, taking the tire off, putting it back on, tightening all the nuts. This can take a long time. And when there's a backup, people are waiting in the waiting room. If somebody doesn't show because they're sick or injured, now there's a bigger backup. So this company, this startup, is now doing this robotically. So you have no problem with the lifting, no problem with the tightening. You have all the data. Everything is right to the quality specification from the tire manufacturer, the auto company. And it's controlled by a person with a cell phone. So which job would you rather have? Would you rather be the person who got trained to operate the system with a cell phone or the person who's lifting tires all day? This is the kind of advances that are being made that can just move the person who was lifting the tires all day up a little bit. So their job is now more valuable to the company. It probably is a safer job, and it's probably a higher paying job. And the demand is there because the company can't find the people to do the job that nobody wanted to do anyway, which is lift the tires all day. So this is how it can work. This is why the person who's operating the cell phone and overseeing the procedure doesn't have to have a 4-year degree. And this is what we're seeing more and more of that's possible in an increasingly automated future.
Excellent example. That's makes your point of how the operator skills required doesn't necessarily need to be higher, even though the technology underneath it is probably much more advanced than what it used to be, right?
Right.
But that's that begs the question though, because we see this here all the time in India, and I'm sure that's the case even in the United States, that there is technology. So this robotics company probably spent weeks or months or something to set this up. It's not, once it's set up, it's really easy to use, but it's the integration, or it's actually adopting this technology for that process of automating tires changing, right? And so when we talk about like machine vision, AI, technologies like these, there is this whole machine learning process where you have to consume a lot of the data, you have to train these models, but then once they're trained, it looks as easy as pie, right? So you just press buttons and you use cell phones to operate it. But tell me, what do you see, or what are some of the trends you see in adopting this technology, system integration bit, right? So do you see that actually sort of being the bottleneck, or do you see some advancements? Yeah.
I don't know about that particular case where they are in their development. They're a startup. They have the technology available. I don't know how widely, if at all, it's being adopted, but it's an example. But you're right. The AI, the machine vision, the training that's got to take place before you can actually install that in a facility do we have enough of those people with the advanced skills? So it's not just a shortage potentially on the operational and maintenance side, but it may be that there aren't enough advanced vision and AI experts. And this is where it gets into global trends. So China, as you know, is very committed to automation. And so they have national plans, made in China 2025. They invest heavily in these technologies. More research papers are coming out of China than anywhere else on artificial intelligence. Now, the US is still perceived to be the leader in actual application and development of artificial intelligence technologies, I believe. But how long will that last if we aren't continually producing more students with those skills? So there is going to be, at some point, hopefully, enough people with these skills. But this is an issue as well. Do we have enough people who can successfully apply machine vision? This is one of the reasons our association started the Certified Vision Professional Program at the basic and advanced levels, because if we're going to train people to be successful with machine vision, we need to have training programs in place and be able to test against those. And so we've done a pretty good job of that with our certification programs, but we're just, reaching hundreds of people. We need to reach thousands of people to get them into these technologies. And that's part of our effort as well, to make it clear that the future offers great pathways for getting involved in areas like machine vision and AI. We're now working with companies like Intel and Microsoft and Amazon and Google and others on developing AI certification program, because we're going to need more people with AI skills. So we're working on that next. And that's, as you mentioned in your introduction, we launched a new tech sector board focused on artificial intelligence. It's a critical technology going forward.
Yeah, for sure, and that's great to see those initiatives. I think back here in India, for instance, I talk to clients both in the North American region in India, and there is, I would say, there's a fair amount of difference in terms of awareness. So I'm not too exposed to the Chinese market, but from what I hear, they are really advanced. They have their skill level in terms of the automation units within manufacturing. It's the system integrators who are providing solutions. They're all fairly savvy about AI. They understand the basics, and they're able to adopt these technologies. I do see the awareness among the US audience being fairly advanced as well when we talk to clients in the US. But I see that the difference when I interact with companies here in India. So there are efforts by, let's say, the NASSCOM body, the National Association of Software Companies. We're part of the Deep Tech Club, and then there's a very large effort that is being done with Intel to also promote Industry 4.0 and deep technologies and educating manufacturing companies in adopting this, because it's not just, I feel the skill requirement is at both ends, from the buyer side as well as on the supplier side. So there has to be that match, otherwise you don't see success. So having said that, what is your perspective on machine vision, and what are some of the key challenges preventing adoption? So why isn't it, on the surface, it looks like you could just put cameras everywhere. There's that much demand. But why is that not happening? What are some of the key challenges preventing adoption from what you're seeing? You mentioned one of them, which is certified professionals and the skills. But what are some of the others that you see?
Well, I mean, it's like with all the other technologies that we represent. In order to, if you're a user, you're probably dealing through an integrator. And the reason you're probably dealing through an integrator is because in the United States, a lot of users have sort of had to wipe out their engineering staff. When we went through the Great Recession, a lot of engineering jobs went away. And even in major companies, that was one of the real impacts during the Great Recession. And a lot of those engineering staff people who lost their jobs ended up starting integration companies, which was a whole nother issue. But there, even in experienced integrators, like you said, there's a shortage of people who really understand machine vision very well. So it's not like there's a tremendous group of expertise at every integrator company. So I think that's one issue. Another one is, what is the challenge that any company faces? What is the cost? What's the return? How easy is it to use? What do we have enough understanding of how to deal with the data? What are the conditions, the lighting conditions in our facility? Are those right? Do we, can we? So there are a lot of challenges with machine vision in general. Now, what we're seeing here now is the big move toward embedded vision systems. So there's cameras in everything. And so that is, continuing on. But if you look at vision as it relates to robotics, it's a key enabler of a lot of tasks, whether it be picking and placing objects, bin picking, sorting and packing, high-speed inspection. I think there probably more widespread adoption in those areas because it's so clear that you can't really inspect 10,000 bottles a minute with human inspectors and get the same level of quality. So, I mean, I think vision is growing. I think we're still a long way to go with the adoption of vision, but it's the same thing in robotics. When we talk about the number of robots that are installed today, I don't know, globally, maybe it's, 3 million robots, something like it. It's a fraction of what it could be and what it will be, because so many companies have the same challenges. In the US, it's small and medium-sized companies. How do I get started? Where do I go for information? How do I get a return on investment quickly? Is it easy enough to use? Do I have people at my company who can do it, or do I have to invest in an integrator? And if I'm going to invest in an integrator, how long will it take and how costly will it be? How much floor space do I need for various applications? Maybe I don't have it. But a lot of these challenges are changing. And on the ROI side, there are, at least on the robotics side, new ways to invest in automation for your company. Robots as a service, for instance, is starting to gain a little bit of traction. Leasing, so that you don't have to put the larger investment up front. So that makes potentially the return on investment much, much quicker. In fact, in that tire example I gave you, the company is talking about charging the customer by the tire that was changed. You don't have to buy the system. It's a big, expensive robot system. Just pay us by the tire. So, I mean, there's new thinking around, you don't just buy the robot system and that's it. That's not the only option anymore. So I think there's going to be more ways to get vision and robotics into end user companies. And that's an encouraging sign.
That's interesting. Yeah. So, it's not just advances in technology, but there's also advances in the business model,
Yes.
Inspection as a service, robots as a service. Now, do you see some early signs, for making a case for inspection as a service? Have you seen any business models or companies that are doing that?
I haven't seen too much of that. I think during the pandemic, we did a lot of virtual events, and somebody may have talked about that, but it's not coming immediately to mind of something I've seen like that. But it
wouldn't be too far down the future, though, right? But
I don't think so. I mean, there's all kinds of different models of how to do vision out there too. Companies are looking at, well, it shouldn't be just inspecting at the end. It ought to be process control, and there ought to be cameras everywhere. And then they're looking at, how do we put cameras to show the people what they're doing? Now, this is a controversial one. Cameras watching the people do their job. If the people are doing it in a way that might cause a back injury, let's say they're lifting something all day and they're twisting in a way that could lead to more injuries in the company or with the people that will, obviously you don't want people out of work. People aren't necessarily want cameras watching them do their job all day. So that could be, potentially problematic. But I've seen things with video recording processes that you can identify, exactly where the defect occurred. You can watch the video and see where the video occurred, where the problem is in the process. So there's lots of unique things being done with vision itself, separately, and not all connected to robotics.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, there are companies like Drishti, etc., that
Yes.
do human process monitoring, and it's always been
Yes.
a little, is the private impeding on privacy? Can you record people? Things like that. So it's always
Yes.
interesting. So we had a panel discussion with the founders together, and we had an interesting conversation there. So, I'd like to also take a short deviation, take some audience questions. So if anyone in the audience has some questions, please do post it. I see a few of them. So Sanket is asking one way, or he has some thoughts. One way of thinking here is that AI and robotics will definitely reduce jobs, and according to the spending, money will also decrease. And if consumerism decreases due to low income, then who uses expensive items, or people will start to use things which have high priority to live. Other than that, can consumerism decrease? So quite a loaded question. So I think what Sanket is asking is, if robots will reduce jobs, then consumer spending will also reduce. So if that happens, then will things impact the economy? Is that sort of I guess a summary of the question? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I don't think robots will reduce jobs. So I'll start right there. And here's why. The real threat to jobs, and I don't care what company you work for, what industry you're in, is if your company can no longer compete, because that's when all the jobs are gone. In the United States, what happened was people thought you could just send the manufacturing overseas and the lower labor costs would be the way that you would compete. Turned out not to be such a great bet, because not only did we lose a lot of manufacturing jobs in our country, but we had a lot of problems in shipping time. We had issues with quality. We had issues with intellectual property. And so now companies have thought, well, maybe we should have automated. Maybe automation can help us bring jobs back. But the real indicator that that is the path forward is what happened, in my opinion, in China. So when I got involved 40 years ago, China wasn't an issue of any kind. Nobody thought about China. Now China is the biggest automator in the world. And yet China is the biggest adopter of robots in the world. The biggest commitment to automation from the government is Chinese. What does that tell you? It tells you that if you want to be able to compete in this world on quality, productivity, speed, low-cost labor isn't the way forward. It's automation. So the United States is now waking up to, well, maybe we should be automating to compete. If we don't automate to compete here, and same thing I would say is true in India and elsewhere, all those jobs are at risk, because this is the way to have the quality that you need, the speed, and the productivity. That will increase jobs. We see countless examples of that. Companies telling us that they couldn't find people to do entry-level jobs. There's an automotive supplier in Michigan who talks about this all the time. They would hire people. The people would work for a few weeks. They didn't like the job. They would quit. The company would then have to go out and hire more people. In the meantime, productivity was low. As soon as they invested in robotics, they took away all of those issues. Quality went up, productivity went up, and they were able to lower their costs. And as a result, win new business. In the case of this company, they got their biggest customer, Toyota, who they never could have gotten before. Once they had more business, they hired more people. So now they're automating heavily, and yet they have more people than they had before they started automating. So we think that's more of what the path forward looks like. People and robots working together, not people instead of robots. And it's because of the reason you said, if there were no people, who would be buying the products? If people didn't have jobs, who would be buying these products? You can't sell them to people who don't have jobs. It's exactly that. We're trying to create jobs, not destroy them.
Very true, very true. I think this question used to come up quite a bit, but I think things are starting to realize the importance of automation, especially policymakers, government, and even here in India, where they're trying to create, there's this a big, made in India push that's happening to create jobs, and the policymakers are all advocating automation to stay competitive, to create more jobs, and to expand and grow. So automation creates jobs, doesn't reduce it. So I think that's that myth can be laid to rest for sure. Next question comes from, I think, from a YouTube source. How do you see the market in India for Industry 4.0 with respect to machine vision, and how do you compare it with the rest of the world? I don't know, Jeff, any thoughts? You said you did a seminar in Mumbai 5 years ago, but do you have any interaction with the Indian audience and Indian manufacturers with respect to machine vision or Industry 4.0 in general? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I do have some thoughts on that. So when I was in India, and it was several years ago now, I went to a automotive company and visited one of their plants, and they had 2,000 people working there and 0 robots. And I said, why?
This is 5 years ago, you said?
No, it was more than 5 years ago. I think this was like maybe 2008 or 9. I can't remember the year I was in India.
Okay.
It was at an industrial automation show, and I had to go back and look at the year. But the point was, I asked the plant manager, why are there no robots here? And his answer was, well, we have them at some other facilities, but there's really no need for them. We have people doing all these tasks. Now, if you fast forward to today, when we do our virtual events, there are a tremendous number of engineering professionals from India attending our virtual events. In fact, when I look at our website traffic, a tremendous number from India. So I can see, just on those metrics alone, the growing interest in information about robotics, AI, machine vision, and Industry 4.0 is very consistent, the demand for information from India. That tells me that we are making advances in India. Now, I don't know, I didn't get a chance to look at what the latest global numbers show about adoption in India. I would still think relative to other players, it's still, pretty low, a long way to go in terms of these technologies, but it's way beyond, I would guess, from where it was when I was in Mumbai. So I think things are probably headed in the right direction there. And I'm encouraged to hear the views that policymakers have, that this is not something to be afraid of, not a job killer, but something that can actually make India more productive. The Chinese did it. There's no reason why it can't be done in India.
Yeah. There's a lot of expectation and hope around how people are trying to de-risk from one geographical source in their supply chain to make to have backup supply sources, and India is one of the key markets for that. And I see a number of our customers, for instance, when we cater to these machine vision automation companies, are doing that at the behest of their North American customers. So they do have requirements that it says, this has to be an automated inspection, otherwise we won't buy from you. So this is also being driven by demands from end users. And so I agree with you. I think there is still, there's a long way to go, but there's certainly a lot of advancements that's happening. And that's very encouraging to see. And having said that, Andy, it's interesting to note that a lot of your audience, and especially in your webinars, in your certification programs, are from India. And so do you see also, what advice would you have, or what indicators do you see in terms of a supply and demand for automation services coming from India? So do you see that? Because unlike the IT services industry, where it's a lot easier, right? You can deliver software fairly easily through a remote location, but it's much harder to do any kind of automation integration, especially when it requires on the ground sort of efforts. But you see automation being outsourced and from various locations like India, etc. Do you see that trend, and what advice would you have for companies looking to cater to a North American or a Western audience?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've seen that trend, except possibly in areas like remote diagnostics, which is starting to emerge. There have been some startups in the US, with some successful remote diagnostics tools. But I'm not aware of any kind of remote services being provided for automation globally. I'm sure there are, it's not something that's coming to mind. So I don't know that I can offer too much advice in that area for companies who might want to do that. I know that when it comes to integration, that the customers that I'm most aware of are usually looking for somebody pretty close, because they want people in there who can troubleshoot when it's necessary, and they usually have a pretty close relationship with their integrator. So again, if it wasn't remote diagnostics, I don't know what it would be. Although I will say, having said that, in the mobile robot space, so the autonomous mobile robot space is one of the hottest areas of robotics right now. Robots that are working in warehouses and distribution centers. And some of these systems are being set up remotely. They're shipping the product to the customer, and then actually via cloud, setting these things up and operating them without ever, in some cases, without ever even going there. This is what I'm told from some of our suppliers of autonomous mobile robots. So there may be opportunities there.
Interesting. Okay. Which leads me to my next question. What are some of the key technologies that you're seeing in machine vision, which is really sort of gaining interest and momentum from your perspective?
Well, again, I don't know that I'm an expert on the key technologies in vision. Where I focus my attention is on where is vision being used. So rather than the advancements,
that would be interesting. Yeah. So
yeah,
where do you see new areas? Yeah.
I mean, we are seeing it used in some of the places that are automating now that never. So this is the big trend that we haven't talked about. So historically, robotics was primarily used in the automotive industry in the United States. 60, 65, 70% when I started of robots went to automotive related companies. Okay. In 2020, for the first time, and through the first 9 months of 2021, it's accelerating. The non-automotive customers, when you roll it all into a ball, is using more robots than the automotive related customers. This is a major change. So what's in that ball of non-automotive customers? Well, electronics, aerospace, metalworking. Okay, those are ones that we would expect. Food, consumer goods, yeah, life sciences. What about things like agriculture and construction? They're now retail. So every one of these industries is now moving from investigating automation to adopting automation. So vision is everywhere now, because you can't really, if you're talking about food processing, you got to inspect. It's not just a matter of robots, it's robots and vision. If you're talking about construction, if you're going to be building structures using robotics, well, again, vision's going to be a part of that. If you're talking about security, well, of course, you're going to have vision involved. If you're looking at, I talked about how big the market is right now for logistics. A lot of vision, making sure these packages are labeled correctly and shipped out. There's just so many opportunities for vision, retail. It's everywhere. So I think the adoption of vision, again, may not be growing as fast as everybody would like who's selling products. It's growing pretty quickly, but it's reaching more spaces. And as it reaches more spaces, the opportunities for growth increase.
That's very interesting. Yeah, there's been more adoption in non-automotives. There's a number of new sectors that are adopting automation, and that's interesting and encouraging to hear as well. So for someone.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. It's not because the automotive adoption is going down. The automotive sector is up 20% in terms of adoption, I think, through the first 3 quarters, or at least the last quarter. Why? Because of electric vehicles. That needs a whole range of retooling, or the batteries associated with them. That needs retooling to manufacture. So while that sector is increasing, it's the non-automotive sectors that are increasing faster. And that should be encouraging for anybody who's making vision.
That's encouraging to know. So anyone in the audience in the automation industry, that's there's definitely a lot of potential. Automotive, other industries, tremendous opportunity. So having said that, someone who's looking to cater to the US market as or someone starting out in the US market, maybe from the US itself. So we actually started out in the US. I'm a US citizen. I'm actually, and then I do have a team here, but I do have strong roots in the US. So I meet a lot of industrial automation companies who are also emerging startups. But they come from a different, I would say, a school of thought. They come from technology, software in Silicon Valley, but then in Detroit there's a lot of nuts and bolts. There's machines. It's sort of a different world than being in front of a laptop and writing cloud code. So what advice would you have to people who want to get into the automation industry from a technology perspective, like disruptors or innovative technologies? How should they approach going to market, having conversations with potential clients, let's say traditional manufacturing companies, maybe mid-market, enterprise? So what advice would you have for them?
Well, my advice is you need to talk to those people that you want to work with, whether it be integrators or potential users. And a great resource for facilitating those conversations is our association. This is what I do almost every day. You asked me early on, what are some of the things I do? It's connect startups with people they should be talking to. Sometimes it's venture capital people because they've got a good view. If you go back 10 years ago, you would find no venture capital people interested in investing in robotics. Today, hundreds of millions of dollars are flowing into robotics. Why? Because these people are smart. They know that there's a big future in robotics and automation, and they're making their bets because they know they don't need to be right every time, but they need to be in the space. So I'm approached all the time by startups saying, hey, what can you do to help us? And my answer is simple. Join the association as a startup. It's really inexpensive. And I will write personal introductions to people if I know them at companies where you would like a conversation. In fact, we just had a company that spun out of a university. I happened to be at that university and saw the demo before they spun out. And it said, that looks really cool. Some of our members would probably be interested in it. They said, well, we're having trouble at the company that you just said. I said, well, that company has a member on our board. I'll be happy to send an introduction to that person. Well, fast forward, the news release just came out recently. That company had a major investment from the company I introduced them to. This happens on a regular basis where even if the introduction leads to nothing, it leads to information for the startup, because the startup needs to know how what they're saying is perceived by a potential user or integrator or somehow partner. And so those discussions are critical, and we offer all kinds of ways to facilitate them.
Oh, that's super cool to hear. So sign up with A3 and then leverage the network. And so is that open to all startups, anyone providing industrial automation? Is there some criteria?
No, it's open to any startup globally. And I would just say, you can reach me on my email address at jburnstein@automate.org. I'll take a look at what you're doing and we can discuss it. Because I want to help startups. So the reason isn't for us to get members to the association. Believe me, the membership dues isn't what this is about. What this is about is to find technology that's going to be useful to our current members, to our partners, the suppliers of the technology, but also to society. I mean, there are a lot of great startups who've really moved the ball forward here. And we want to be a part of that and helping that. Part of the advancing automation effort is to help identify these startups. And believe me, they're not all in Silicon Valley. You know as well as I do, they're all over the world. And that's why we're a global association. We love working with startups.
That's interesting. And what do you see most of these startups who approach you? Do you see any common trends in terms of the challenges that they have, or the asks that they have?
Yeah, a lot of them have what they have developed is pretty cool technology, but they don't really know what to do with it. They don't know, okay, does this fit in this sector? And is this something that somebody would actually pay to use? I was with a startup recently who, their business model, they don't charge for what they're doing. They're doing this incredible stuff, but they're making it open source and eventually trying to figure out how they're going to capitalize on that. Well, it's great stuff that has value. They kind of need to figure out how to unlock that value to grow the company. There's only so long you can live off of, government grants or, small amounts of self-funding. You need to actually be able to monetize what you're doing. So the knowledge base that we can put these people in touch with can help with that issue as well.
Got it. Okay. So you would help with, helping them create, business models, product market fit, seeing, where, how to monetize.
I would help them talk to people who can help.
Talk to people who would do that. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, it all starts with that they're committed to, first of all, joining, of course, but to actually have something that I think our members would be interested in. If it's something that I don't think our members would be interested in, there's not much I can do to help them, because I'm asking people, please talk to this company. I think they've got something that looks useful.
Got it. And in addition to signing up and being part of your association, what would you also recommend certain events that they join? Do you have anything coming up? So what are some of those things that one could...
For our members, which is why it starts with membership, because we have a members only event at the end of January 31st to February 1st, called the A3 Business Forum. All the senior leaders from the automation industry in North America, but many from throughout the world pre-pandemic, we'll see what it's like in 2022, are there. So it's easy for me to take a startup, and this is what it looks like. We're at a cocktail reception, let's say, and the startup says, hey, I want to talk to so-and-so. And it's right there. He's a friend of mine. Here, let me go introduce you. This is how that looks at an event like that. It's not a trade show. It's a business conference. Networking is the center of it. So for a startup to be there and have access to these people and get a chance to talk to them, that is invaluable. So there's that. Then there's Automate 2022 in Detroit, June 6th through 9th. So now that is an event that is the largest trade show and conference in North America for automation. We'll have about 600 exhibiting companies. We'll have about 20,000 attendees. Probably 1,500 of those will attend the paid conference that takes place at the event. This is a massive event for automation. It has a startup competition. Now, a few years ago, one of the companies that participated in our startup competition was Dexterity. Dexterity didn't win the startup competition, but they were there at the event. Well, this year, about a month or two ago, Dexterity announced another 140 million in new venture capital. So they're up to over 200 million. But I think being part of the Automate show helped give visibility to what they were doing. This is true of other companies. Yeah, Right Hand Robotics, other companies who were startups took advantage of this opportunity. You really need to figure out a way to somehow be part of Automate if you're in this world and want to sell to North American companies. So that would be my next piece of advice.
Great pointers there. Great pointers. So sign up to be a member, attend the business conference in January. And I assume all this would be, information is on your website?
Yes, so all this is on our website. The Automate show itself also has its own website. So our main website is automate.org. Easy to remember. The show website is automateshow.com. Also easy to remember.
Certainly is. And then be part of the June Detroit show in automation.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Where Qualitas is going to sign up, we're going to be there. So our team is working with the organizers to make sure we participate. So I look forward to either meeting you in person in one of these events. So hopefully we'll have a chance to see each other face to face, in addition to having this virtual conference. And so all these are in-person events, right? So
yes,
the January business conference, as well as of course the trade show. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, we held our first in-person event in Memphis on autonomous mobile robots and logistics, and that was about a month ago. And we had 650 people there. Masks were required. That event had proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test required. It's not clear that we can do that in every state in the country. We could do that there. We'll see what we're hoping by June, certainly, that COVID is behind us in the US. In Florida, it's a little different in terms of what you're allowed to do, but we will have masks required. So we think there have been no major super spreader events connected to trade shows as far as we can tell in the United States since things have reopened. I've been to 5 events now live, major trade shows, 20,000, 30,000 people. Knock on wood, I haven't.
In the US, these are
yes.
Wow. Okay, 20,000 people.
I was at
a lot.
Fab Tech with over 20,000. That was in Chicago. I was at Pack Expo in Las Vegas, over 30,000. So I'll be at the
Got it.
Consumer Electronics Show, I hope, which could have way beyond that. People are going to trade shows live. They want to be in person. There's a great demand for the networking that takes place in person. It can't be replicated in the virtual world.
Got it. Yeah, that's good to know. Good to know that things are getting back to normal. I miss live events. I used to go to the Stuttgart show all the time. We had the first one, but I couldn't get to it this year. But I look forward to the next year. And I used to go to the Photonics West, both the East, the West, and the Automate show in Boston. So I look forward to attending our first show in 2022. So great to hear that you're seeing that trend continue, and encouraging signs. And so, in these shows, what would you say, has been the biggest change you've seen, not just in the show, but sort of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? What are some of the key? You've been with A3 for 10 years now, or longer.
Closer. Yeah, 40
almost. 4 decades.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the dramatic shifts that you've seen, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, some of the trends in terms of how people are doing business?
Yeah. What's really interesting in the post-pandemic, hopefully, but since the pandemic world, when you go to a trade show and you talk to the exhibitors there, they all say the same thing. Every single person who comes to their booth is interested in what I'm showing. Why? Because why would somebody get on an airplane in the middle of a global pandemic if they weren't interested? Why would somebody even get in a car to drive to the show and put on a mask and do this if they didn't have an interest? Well, the reason is they do have an interest. They want to buy technology. They're so desperate to fill this labor shortage and to find automation that can help them, that if they know there are going to be hundreds of exhibitors at an event that can help them, they want to be there. So maybe they don't send 5 people, maybe they send 2 people to go work the show. But if you go into a booth and you have a conversation with somebody, you're likely to be a prospect for that company. And so the trade shows are actually being considered now to be a really, really important place to be for companies. In some cases, the companies are saying, we can do this with less equipment in our booth. Maybe we used to jam our booth with equipment. Maybe we don't have to jam the booth with equipment. Maybe we can make it more conducive for conversation. Maybe we have the same amount of floor space at the show, less equipment, more ways to have conversations, because the people coming want to talk about automating at their company. These aren't people that are just curious anymore, who are going out in a pandemic or knowing that they have to fly back to their country and take the risk of testing positive at the airport and then having to quarantine in another country for 2 weeks or whatever. So these are serious customers who are showing up at trade shows. Not that there weren't before. It's just that before you might have had a lot of serious people and then some who were just curious. Now it seems to be all serious people.
Very interesting. Okay, wow, that's a very encouraging as well as important point to note here. And so when you say people flying back to their countries, so are you suggesting there are international travelers coming into these trade shows? It's cross-border.
If they can, if they can, they do come. Now, again, depending on where and what, and which country you're flying into, who knows what the laws are going to be for each country in 3 months from now, right? Or 6 months from now, who knows? Yeah. But it's the reason that I'm not traveling internationally or haven't yet. It's because if I were to test positive in, let's say, if I had gone to Stuttgart and I tested positive at the airport in Stuttgart, I wouldn't be allowed back in the US. And so I'd have to stay. Now, maybe that would be okay if I didn't have an event that was a week after that Stuttgart event in Memphis, but I did have an event a week after that Stuttgart event. So I had to plan my schedule so that I knew I would be back in time for our Memphis event. So that's what people's thinking now has to be when they travel internationally. What are the rules? As long as COVID is a factor, can I afford to be somewhere for however long that the country I came from is going to require.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I know there's COVID certifications. There's a funny incident with my a close friend just recently got married, and they were looking to take a trip, a honeymoon, and they realized that they both had different vaccines, and they couldn't. One of them was allowed, one of them weren't. So it's not just whether you test positive; it's also now the having the right vaccine, and what
Right.
passport you have, and so things are so much more complicated. But in spite of all that, as you said, if people do cross those hurdles, end up in a show, these guys must be dead serious, right?
Yes.
So they're just not going to come there for the joy, for the sake of,
Right.
educating themselves, especially when there's
Exactly.
so many virtual events and things like that online where you can do that. So when they're actually sitting on a plane, hauling themselves to another place, it's probably they want to meet you face to face. So
Exactly.
yeah, point noted. I think that's an excellent point, and we're sure to take advantage of that. Others listening in as well, that's good advice. And we do have a couple of other questions that I got in. One of them that says, what are other than automation, robotics and AI, what are some of the other key companies or trends or applications that you're seeing in automation
Other than those spaces, I would say one of the hot areas is additive manufacturing, 3D printing. We're seeing a lot of companies interested in that. And of course, this whole industry 4.0, the machines talking to each other, interoperability of machines is becoming a really important trend. We were just, as I mentioned, at that autonomous mobile robot logistics event. FedEx is a big supporter of that. And a lot of the FedEx executives spoke at that event about how important it's going to be if you want to sell to FedEx that your machines talk to other machines. Because FedEx wants to buy machines from your company and a competitor of yours, and whoever's got the best in class in each area. It could be a robot, it could be a autonomous mobile robot. They need to make sure these machines talk to each other. And if they don't, then it slows the whole process down. So they're really focused on that. So these are things we hear about. Cybersecurity is another issue we hear about. Again, this isn't necessarily technology, but it's an important element here because the possibility of company hacking into your system through your robot control system or through your camera or whatever, this is a risk that people are concerned about. So we're going to be focusing more attention on that. We'll have a discussion of that in Orlando at the A3 Business Forum.
Oh, okay. So additive manufacturing, machine-to-machine communication, security, especially, a lot of devices being connected to the internet and being potentially accessible to the rest of the world. So these are some of the areas. Got it. So that's interesting to note. And so another question that I have, other than the US and China, what are some of the trends you're seeing in APAC and Asia, right? So you mentioned China being one of the leaders, but do you see a lot of automation activity? What are some of the geographies or trends that you see there?
Korea, they're very active. Singapore, very active. Japan, of course, is traditionally been the leader in terms of adopting robotics. The Chinese have surpassed them. So, I mean, it would be hard for me to point to a country that isn't, getting serious about automating, but certainly Korea is one that has been serious for a long time. And I think I'm pretty sure that in terms of the number of robots per 10,000, manufacturing workers, I think Korea is probably the most automated on that basis.
Hmm. Yeah, that certainly would make sense. And so, final question, I guess, that's from me before, we can wrap this up. This has been a exciting interaction. Is where do you, what would you predict? What if you were to look into crystal ball 5 years from now? So, you've been in this for 40 years, but I think the pace of adoption has been sort of exponential, right? So the rate of automation technology, the first 20 years probably look very different, the slope of the curve compared to the next 20 years. So in 5 years from now, what are some of the key things that you're going to, what would be your sort of optimistic view of automation? And how would you describe that?
Well, I mean, 5 years is a pretty short window, and I don't
10
think,
years maybe.
yeah. So if you're looking at 10 years, there are some, I talked about all the places that robots are and automation is expanded, all these industries, but think about where it isn't. So we haven't made much progress in terms of robots and automation in our homes. Very difficult environment. The only viable product to date has been a vacuum cleaner in our homes. Great, everybody needs to vacuum, but we want robots in our homes that do other things. So what I think is one of the barriers there, of course, has been mobility. We're making advances in mobility. Vision, continued advances there. But the ability for the technology to do multiple things. So right now we have single purpose robots that might do something in our home like a vacuum cleaner. But as the population ages, and this is especially true right now, I'm speaking mostly about the United States, as the population ages, if people are sound of mind, we see some research going on of new Alzheimer treatments, okay? So if that, let's just say, now we may have to look 20 years out, but let's just say that these Alzheimer treatments actually lead to something. Now I'm going to be in my 80s and I'm going to be sound of mind instead of not. But my body might still be breaking down a little bit here and I might have a hard time walking. So is there going to be a robot that's got vision, artificial intelligence, mobility that could be useful to me in my home, making meals, making sure that I'm able to get up out of my chair into the shower and then into bed, and then handling the security at home, calling the doctor if for some reason I'm not responding. Will we get to that point? We've been talking about this for decades now. The technologies are getting better. Still lots of problems. Every home is different. There's stairs. The vision system has to be able to tell, or the AI, the difference between a baby and a doll. How can we get me to be able to stay in my home and not have to go into an assisted living facility where I certainly don't want to go, where there's certainly a labor shortage? People don't want to do those jobs, believe me. So this is a really critical question. There's not enough being spent on it. In Japan, they're doing research. Toyota's trying to develop something. But if the way forward could be a whole bunch of individual single-purpose devices, but every one of those things I need something to do the cooking, the cleaning, the getting me in and out of bed, somebody monitoring the house. And then probably there's going to be in 20 years some autonomous shuttle that can take me to the doctor when I need to go. All of these things that benefit society. These are the things where there's this still long way to go, but certainly would add value to us as people. I hope these things happen. I hope these technologies are applied in that way.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So, out of the shop floors and B2B, but actually make an impact to the quality of lives, right? So that's really when the difference in automation can be felt from, an indirect impact of good quality products to real good quality of life. That's very interesting. And I think that's really a great way to summarize and sort of conclude this is automation is here to impact people's lives. Today, it's impacting jobs, the economy, and tomorrow it's going to impact lives directly and help you with your quality of life for the future. And that's the impact of automation. And so with that, Jeff, I'd like to send a huge vote of thanks to your attendance here, sharing some of your key insights. We talked about a number of things about automation, technology, challenges that one would see, good advice to startups, entrepreneurs who are wanting to enter the US market, enter into the automation markets, and also hear some of your perspective in terms of what the future trends would look like. So we had a very well-rounded conversations. Now, for those of you watching and couldn't make it, this is going to be recorded. It's live. It's also going to be on YouTube fairly shortly, and we have a very wide distributor base through our partners and ourselves. This is going to go out to close to 1,000 audiences through our partner network as well as through our own distribution channels. And I look forward to sharing this with everyone and having more such conversations with you, Jeff, and hearing some of your insights sometime in the future as well. And,
Great.
and more excited to also see you in person. So
yes,
hopefully next year.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.